everyone, the name is Aussie Flowl. Portal is a game, shockingly, and it's one that went through a pretty fascinating development cycle due to the amateur nature of the developers. When developing games, the development team behind it can always be found conceiving new ideas for it. Whether it's a location, a gameplay concept, or even just testing the game at its bare minimum, the first Portal is no different to the typical development cycle of video games. In order to implement ideas into the game, developers make what are called test levels, done to ensure the game functions as expected after code changes by testing bare essentials, or to test a specific new feature. These levels are made for trialing these ideas, and aren't intended to be seen by the public's eye. In the case of Portal though, we have practically every single level that existed during two specific snapshots of development, of which having leaked online a few years back, meaning that it is now possible to see these levels with our own two eyes. In this video, we'll be checking out a small handful of these beta levels, ones that most people would consider weird. I won't be discussing every single development level here. For instance, there are levels that were made for demo showcasing purposes, ones that are incredibly obvious in what the purpose is, or levels that are just not worth talking about. So, let's begin. We'll be going through these maps by year on Portal Project Beta, which is a December 2006 build of Portal 1, unless I specify otherwise. Now these first three maps are interesting since they're actually maps from Half-Life 2's development, having been copied over into Portal's repository. Test Room Point Camera is for testing a point camera entity, who would have guessed? This entity specifically is a camera that projects a live feed from itself in the map to a screen elsewhere within. This technology was used in Half-Life 2 in various scenarios, most notably the Breencasts. Why this map is in Portal's folders will make sense once we see the other point camera related map in here. Test Room Point Camera Teleport. This map is nearly identical to the previous, but with one key difference. There is a citizen from Half-Life 2 here, who will walk out from the cameras in the live feed, and now you can see why the Portal developers grabbed these maps in particular. This was likely them wanting to see if portals existed in Source already. While this iteration is a lot more limited in comparison, since this is solely made out of map logic, you could probably consider these to be one of the first portals ever made for Portal, if you ignore the fact these maps have a last edited date of June 20th, 2004, meaning they were made prior to Half-Life 2's release, and were made for Half-Life 2 itself. This map, Zoo Combine, is the first of the Zoo maps of Portal. These maps are not exactly style guides, but rather a collection of assets the developers can reference, hence, a zoo. This map, as the name implies, is a zoo of practically all Combine related models and assets from Half-Life 2. The existence on this map in Portal may seem a little weird if you're not in the loop, but one of the most well-known Portal beta facts is that Aperture as we know it did not exist. Originally, it was another Prospect South facility run by the Combine. We refer to this era of development as the Prospect era for this reason. Anyways, despite this being a map of Combine related assets that the Portal developers likely copied over from the Half-Life 2 repository, it has some bizarre oddities of its own. For example, this APC right at the start of the level is not a model, it is an actual vehicle entity that you can, well, get into to try and drive. It's not functional, and you can't do anything, but it's still really fucking weird. Another weird entity oddity are these two Combine soldiers, named Soldier AR2 and Soldier Shotgun respectively. They're not actually models in the map, but are a unique entity known as a Cycloflex, an ancient entity in the Source engine. By dealing damage to them, they will cycle through every single animation sequence in the chosen model. You can see what animation is being played via the ENT text command, and the shotgun at Combine here is not wielding a real weapon. Rather, it's a prop dynamic ornament, which in incredibly simplified terms, lets models be attached to other models via bone parenting. The shotgunner is not using the unique skin added in episode 2 due to this map being from 2004. There's functional health and suit chargers, some working thumpers which will scare off spawned antlines, and nearly all the gates and doors will open if you go near them. This dropship container is a physics prop for some reason, and some eagle-eyed viewers would have already noticed the fact this map features 4 different Citadel models in the skybox. There's even a barely functional sequence of some Combine walls smashing down some rubble. As for mapping anomalies, there's these binoculars that are apparently named Combine Gate Large, with a trigger around it like the gates in this map. Let's move on from that map. Zoo Lab is a bit more of a unique zoo map, showcasing the assets to be used in the lab section of Portal. For reference, the escape levels were originally referred to by lab level in their internal map files, while the test chambers were referred to as intro levels. Prerequisite information aside, this map is divided up into 3 distinct sections, 2 of which have names, being the prop room and the decal room. There's also this unnamed third area that has a bunch of pipes and support structures in it, so I can only presume this is the pipe room. This map has many text messages laid about it, detailing every little bit about this map, ranging from the textures used to all the decals seen on every surface. While there's nothing too interesting on the Half-Life 2 side of things, this map appears to feature some unique assets. Wall decals F, G, and H. These are missing textures when you load up the map, which should indicate the obvious. Luckily, the map also lists file names, so we can see their names are decal graph, decal equation, and decal drawing. The 2016 leaks of Portal's development repositories actually have the textures for these, so here's the textures pulled by Wolfclock and in the map proper. Decal drawing is the weirdest one out of the three. It has the word quanta in it, under what seems to be a theoretical model of a wormhole. Exactly what this means is a topic for another day. But moving along, aside from the obvious, there doesn't seem to be much more to talk about, but there are some deeper oddities with the internal map file. There is a strange collection of vents chilling in the void that don't seem to fit any room in the map. There's a lighting entity here that references the Lab 2 level, and a receiver cart model and rope that both reference an RM6. The RM naming format was possibly one of the first ever that was used for Portal's maps, so seeing a mention of it here is peculiar. Let's move on to the final zoo map. Zoo test area is, as you might guess, for the test chambers back in early Portal development. The first room features a whole heap of wall destruction props, rubble, this weird spiral staircase, and a Combine logo on the wall. This area I can only presume was for the devs to have an easy reference for every destruction related props they might use. The second room of this map is strange. It features a toxic goo pit, 2 platforms, a catwalk to the side, and exactly what it looks like. This is a ragdoll from Half-Life 2 of a citizen in toxic goo, so you can probably imagine what the Portal developers were thinking of saying with this one. This ragdoll entity actually is named, being a floating body level 5, which tells us it comes from the Prospect era version of Test Chamber 8. The third and final room in this map is the most interesting. We can see a lot of early version test elements from very early on. For one thing, the original unstationary scaffolds take up most of the space. Before the platforms traveled on rails of light, the developers originally had them be instant kill scaffolds that will electrify the player. This is mentioned in the developer commentary for Portal 1. We can also find the early Prospect version of the energy pellet catcher on the floor here. No launcher weirdly, but right nearby is something pretty interesting. One of the first Portal gun pedestal designs. This design is made purely out of brushwork, and yeah, we'll ignore the way the gun is floating on this thing. This is obviously due to the fact the Portal gun has changed models many times throughout development, and with this near retail version of the gun, you can tell the origin of the model has changed since 2005. We have a few more tests for the unstationary scaffold rails, and then something very interesting, incredibly early versions of the Cuban buttons. Interestingly, this cube is a Funk Fizzbox, a brush-based entity, and is actually lighter than normal cubes. Anyways, that's about all there is for this map. There is this room outside the normally accessible area as well, but this is something present in a lot of maps that handle energy pellet catchers, so it's not really as bizarre as you might think. Test Room Trigger Portal is located in the exact same room for the point camera tests, being reused from these maps. This is a test level for a trigger entity, known as a trigger portal, though the entity doesn't seem to function anymore. It's also these textures, simply called Portal 1. Yeah, they're both just Portal 1. They're actually the very first portal texture ever made, being what are known as the noise portals. They are literally just Photoshop noise with a big 1 across it, though in this map they're cut off. The textures are on a monitor brush, most likely to have an actual projection to the portals themselves. They don't work here though, since they use it in a valid shader that doesn't exist anymore. While nothing in this map actually functions anymore, there are still some peculiar oddities to point out. For one, this map seems to build off of what's seen in the point camera teleport tests, using point cameras as well. There's also a cactus pot here, I presume for testing physics objects through portals. I believe with this map, we can certifiably say this might be some of the first portals ever made for Portal, if they functioned. This map also contains even earlier versions of the portals. Hidden in the VMF file are 2 viz grips. Enabling them shows portals using the shader slab models from Valve's shader testing. Pretty whack. Now here's something arguably as interesting. Lab Level 1. This map is possibly one of the only scrap puzzles in Portal, period. While this map was technically last modified on March 14, 2006, it's from the Prospect era development, so I'm sticking it in this section for brevity. This is a puzzle where many infinite health energy pellets would bounce around the inside of the cage, and there's a button you have to put a cube on. When you load up this map with 0 edits, the cube is already on the button. Who knows why? Probably for testing? It's speculated that Lab Level 1 is a mysterious and lost Test Chamber A12, but we don't really have enough evidence to suggest the map even existed at any point in the developer repositories for Portal 1. If a more updated version of Lab Level 1 exists in the form Test Chamber A12, it's probably stuck on some Portal developers' old hard drives, rotting away. This isn't actually where the tale at Lab Level 1 ends. Located in the map's custom directory from the 2006 build of Portal is customexample.tga, an image that shows lab level 1. Yes, the image is this low resolution. Note the early cube and button designs present. This was probably intended to be an example of a custom map to show off the custom folder system that Portal had in place. Interestingly, this map is given a proper name, Cage o' Bulls, and credits it to Jeep Barnett, a developer in Portal. Let's now move on to 2006. Ragdoll Test is a giant empty room that features 2 cube droppers. As the name implies, this is a test where the ragdoll is using an escape sequence to cube drop you that you break. And yes, those are ragdolls. They are just attached to the dropper so they don't get flailing around on the floor, which is exactly what this map is testing. Like mentioned, this room is abnormally sized and just completely empty, which is really weird. Kinda gives me the creeps in all honesty. The random hallway in this map that exists for zero purpose doesn't help either, nor the lack of lighting. Let's just move on already. Bonus long jump is incredibly interesting. This map was an idea for a post-game bonus map where the player would try and fling as far as they can and see the distance that they can reach. The distance is measured in yards for some reason. Each 10 yards is represented by an alternating pattern of normal floor tiles and checkered tiles. This map also just inherently looks bizarre. Having any form of Portal content that features a bright sky being contrasted to concrete aesthetic of Portal emanates a super weird vibe. The fact it's all at full bright mode too just adds to it. Now there's nothing actually stopping you continuing to double fling over and over again to reach a further distance. I could guess is what might have been intended, but it's hard to gauge what developers might be thinking for this bonus mode. I can certainly see why this idea was scrapped. It's a cool concept on paper, but there's not much replay value to it. A liquid portal test. Oh boy, liquid portals. These are kind of an anomaly in what exactly the purpose of them was. The main idea being that they're liquid, that happens to be a portal. This map first utilizes the end part chamber 9 slipped off, and by standing on the button, you activate the liquid portal to flood the area. And when it fully encompasses you, you can teleport it to here. Hello Zen Ending. Didn't expect that, did you? If you're not sure what I mean by this, go watch the call-out video I did Rector Overtime that's cut any concept Portal 1. It's super bizarre to see this liquid portal concept make an appearance in conjunction with the Zending area. It could indicate an idea developers had to replace the hole that appears in the wall with a liquid portal later down the line. Liquid portals did see an inclusion in the ending later in development, specifically the iconic December 2006 iteration of GLaDOS fight, where once you defeat the broken glitchy GLaDOS, a liquid portal rises to teleport to your cavern that leads outside. BTS Star Guide! No, not the K-pop band. It's an acronym for behind the scenes, which is how the developers for both Portal games refer to the backstage industrial areas of Aperture Science. This map features a pretty interesting old version of Aperture's industrial regions. You spawn in a very simple testing chamber environment after crawling to the industrial backstage through a broken grate. This is seemingly ripped directly from Test Chamber 16 and mirrored. Or maybe it was the other way around? Regardless, let's actually analyze what we can see here. For one, these comically long pistons, and these giant Half-Life 2 fans being used here. There's also this block of pure light tied to one of the pistons, which I presume was meant to show what the white walls and test chambers were. You can also find Doug Ratman's gaming setup in the corner of the room, and a few metal blocks thrown around. Though, that's not the weird part of this map. Turn your attention to these graded off areas and you'll notice the peculiar presence of giant mechanical gears turning. Yeah, apparently one of the original concepts for Aperture's backstage was to feature giant gears that would be, presumably, powering the facility and controlling motor function of things like pistons. I'm personally glad they cut this idea. The giant gears are kinda comical, even in Portal 2 standards. The atmosphere that went for the final game with all the pistons everywhere was a much better choice. Speaking of, you can actually find a piston in the corner of this giant room this Star Guide exists in. There is actually a later iteration of BTS Star Guide I'm checking out later in this video. Speaking of, let's move on to 2007. Before anything, keep in mind I'm still playing the 2007 maps on Portal Project Beta, so visual differences may exist. DevTest 01 is weird. Its only purpose was originally to serve as a way to check how level transitions worked, since the original DevTest map has an elevated DevTest 01, of which originally contained nothing, aside from this "You win" text on the wall when you exit the elevator. But here, in a later version, a vacuum tube transporting cubes was added, and a rocket turret was also added. Presumably, this was done to easily test the sequence of the rocket turret activating and breaking the tube for a cube. But that's kinda bizarre. Why not load into the map that has this stuff directly? This isn't a consistently repeated maneuver in Portal 1. It's used once and once only. Surely it makes sense to test the map these come from and not need to stick it into dev tests, right? Well, who am I to question developers were trying to keep themselves organized? When you do blow up the vacuum tube transporting the cube, you can actually hop into the tube yourself. Go to the right, and there's that goddamn "You win" text again. Seriously, no, I gotta talk about this text, cause it's weird as fuck. Source has numerous entities that can display text, like game text or point message. What use was there out of making this thing out of brushwork? I get that it's probably a developer being bored and whipping up in a few seconds, but it's still really weird to see any form of text in a physical level like this, especially in Portal. It has the same vibes as all custom maps that will make signs out of brushes rather than models with custom textures. Really goddamn weird. So, Test Fling is kind of interesting. You start in this very tall room, and you can portal up to find what is a giant fling section, similar to Test Chamber 18's ending area. Now, Test Chamber 18 didn't actually originally have that giant fling area, and this map seems like it would have been testing the concept. It has a bit of an interesting layout, with you alternating between both sides of the chamber, and these walls separating each respective fling platform as you rise up, before ending with the angled fling onto an ending platform. It practically is the same concept as Test Chamber 18's ending area, just obviously more primitive. Not much more I can say really. There's some giant pistons in this map holding up the platforms, and you can survive in the goo if you keep yourself swimming to the top. They didn't extend the hurt trigger tall enough. Now the final map we'll cover, Portal BTS Style Guide, is BTS Style Guide's younger and cooler cousin. This shows the Portal developers clearly transitioning towards the industrial aperture style we know and love, but still not quite perfect. We've got the panel setups of the walls, the catwalks, the green support trusses, the generators. Practically everything's coming together here, but the lighting is just that bit off, and so are the texture choices. There's this room of props over in the distance, showing what examples of what assets to use, much like the zoom maps covered early in this video. It's super fascinating to see this map, as it transitioned away from the beta aesthetic towards the retail one, but it's not quite there yet. This industrial backstage area is actually not the only location in this map. By heading through this pair of doors, you can find an incredibly simple office hallway. Zero decals on the walls or anything, it's just blank. The office lights seen throughout Portal 1 are present here too, but seem to be using the white version of plastic textures, which I've never seen before in this context. It actually looks pretty nice. There's even a little observation room here. It features some retail assets in the form of these chairs and this table, but the brush-based monitors are unique. In Retail Portal 1, they appear once in Test Chamber 16 in this observation room, and seem to be left there entirely by mistake, as the developers forgot it existed. The observation window looks out towards nothing, just a wall. These doors all also seem to open and close in sync with each other, since they all share the same entity name. Pretty funny. Anyways, I believe that's all the time we have today. Thank you all for sticking around to the end of this video. If you enjoyed it, go ahead and subscribe. I talk about these topics constantly on this channel, and I would love to have more people who want to learn. If you want to support the channel further, I've got a Discord server you can join, a Twitter you can follow, and if you're generous, a Patreon page. Stay safe y'all. Thank you for watching. Peace.